Hi, it's Joe here from Joe's Country Junction, and I am trying something different today. I am a cross stitcher, and so with cross stitch, a lot of people do videos that are called Stitch With Me videos. So I watch some of those because I'm a cross stitcher too. So I'll be at the couch stitching at night, and sometimes I'll just turn on a YouTube video and I'll just stitch along with somebody as they stitch. And it makes me feel like I'm kind of a little bit more in a community. So I thought I'd try that today, only I'm going to do it with sewing. And so maybe we'll have a sew along with me video. I thought it might be kind of fun just to give it a try. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, that's just fine too. We'll just give it a try. So the project that I'm working on today is a spider web string project. Here it is. I was at a thrift store one day and I saw this in a bag of goodies, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just grab that and try that. There was a pretty big stack of, there was one block that was completely finished, and then there was a big pile like this of more blocks that were partially, this part of the spider web string was done, but that's all. I ended up going home, pulling it out, and counted how many pieces I had, and there was enough for 25 blocks. So that would be like a 5x5 setting, which isn't too bad, but I usually make bigger quilts. A lot of the quilts like this one I'd probably donate to a good cause. So I kind of like to have a bigger quilt for that because I think bigger quilts bring more money at a benefit. I ended up thinking, oh, I'll just go upstairs, I'll find some more red in my red section, and I'll just go along with it, and I will work on making more blocks. Well, I got to my red section, and they're just like really, it's really hard to match reds. This is kind of a, I don't know, kind of a paler red. Maybe you can get a better picture of it. I hope that's showing a true color. And so I couldn't find any more of it. Well, after digging in the box that I had, I was looking when I was digging through and sorting through the bag of goodies that I got, because I bought the bag at the thrift store for, oh, I don't know, like $3 or something. It was really cheap. But there was one more fat quarter in there, and the fat quarter had this little tag onto it. So I went on the blog and I asked anybody if they knew of how to get some more fabric like that. I had looked online, and I Googled myself and hadn't been able to find anything. But after looking, after I put something on the blog, somebody had some of the fabric and they sent it to me, and I was so excited because now I'll be able to make more blocks. So right now, I told you that I had enough to finish 25 blocks so I could do a 5x5 setting. But after the person sent me fabric, I spent some time cutting yesterday with Carver, and he was such a help. No, he was actually pretty good. So I was cutting, and I ended up being able to get enough blocks that I'll be able to make a 7x8 setting. And I'm a little happier with that idea than with just a 5x5 setting. One of the things I did when I was cutting it out, I made sure that I cut some inner border strips, because my plan is to do it like the other spider web string quilt that I did, is to have the blocks in the center, then a narrow narrow inner border, and then a wider piano key border on the way outside. The pattern, if you're interested, is in Bonnie Hunter's String Fling book. Nope, it's not. It's in Bonnie Hunter's book. It's not even in a book. It's a free pattern that Bonnie Hunter has online, is the spiderweb string block quilt. And I'll put a link in the description below, and you'll be able to find a link to get to it, and you can see how to make one. And how about right here, I insert a picture of my previous one that I finished, and that one where the red is right here, I have black instead, and it turned out really cool. I first started liking this quilt way back when I first discovered Bonnie Hunter and Quiltville. And later on, I really liked the pattern. And when Kelly and I hosted a retreat when Bonnie Hunter was there, that was one of the classes that we had her teach. The sad thing is we had so many people wanting to come to the retreat that we ended up expanding the retreat, and Kelly and I ended up teaching at it. And we never got to go to the class where Bonnie Hunter taught the class. It was kind of silly. But anyway, that's a long story that I should probably shorten up. So I sat down to the machine to try to get some of these blocks completed and ran into a little bit of an obstacle. And it's not a big obstacle, and for most people, they probably wouldn't think anything of it one way or the other, but for me, it just bothers me a little bit. If you've been on my blog, joescountryjunction.com, if you look on the right-hand side down towards the bottom where it says tutorials and things like that. Oh, I got a tickle. There's a link to a few blog posts that I wrote about how to select color for quilts. I'm not, don't claim to be a huge expert on anything, but a lot of people say, oh, I love your quilts. How do you get the colors so good? And so I ended up writing a couple blog posts about how I select colors and how I sort my scraps. And I think that those would be helpful and to go back and review if you have trouble understanding what I'm going to talk about next. So this is a sample of one of the blocks that was sent to me that was already finished. For me, I wouldn't have done a block like this. To me, this green polka dot is considered a bright print. That would be white based. This green stripe here would be considered a cream based fabric. The red and the yellow would be considered a white based fabric. This is considered a white-based fabric. This would be a cream-based fabric. This would be a cream-based fabric. And again, this would be a white-based fabric. If you're wondering what that means, I'll try to show you here just a sec. So I take a piece of cream fabric background, and I take a piece of white-based fabric background, like this. So there's two different ones there. Either one of these could be used as a neutral in a quilt. I consider this white-based. I consider this cream-based. And I take the block up next to it, and you can see how if I was making a quilt and I was using this green fabric, that this would probably look better than this white-based fabric. And you can see if I was using these two colors right here that I considered white-based fabric, cream wouldn't look as good with them. So I would probably want to team this white-based with the red chevron pattern or the yellow 30s print. So that's how I consider that something is either white-based or cream-based. I take a strip of fabric and I set it next to the fabric and I decide what it would look better with. Browns and tans and jewel tones and burnt oranges and deep reds. Think fall colors, think Civil Wars. All of those would look better with a cream-based fabric. Now think of bright fun prints. Lots of moda fabrics would be considered more white prints. Those fun, bright lines, the ones that you'd put in, make a quilt for a daughter's room or a granddaughter's room, those are typically more white-based. So here's another one again, where the maker of this mixed up the fabrics differently than I would have used in the fabrics. So now when I go to use my scraps, okay, here's another one. You can see this would be a white base. These are white based. Now we're going here towards more cream based. Here's cream based. Here's more white based out here. So the maker of these blocks kind of mixed it up. So for me, that made it a little bit hard for me to decide if I should grab my bright colored box that are white based or if I should grab my cream colored blocks that are more cream based. The darker prints that are more cream based. So it was a hard decision for me because I really like to use either one box or the other. And I have huge totes of scraps. See, like this. And so it's a tougher decision for me which box I should pull out, because I don't want the blocks that I didn't make to really stand out. And I don't want the quilt to look like there's obvious differences in there. So I kind of decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the bright based fabrics, and then I'm going to once in a while throw in a cream based fabric just to make it look like it matches the other blocks that were already made in the box I got at the thrift store. So I'm going to set these aside, and I already prepped my papers. Let me think here. So what I use is I use telephone. This is from a telephone book. I've also gotten my annuity that I have like returns for my annuity. It comes back in a little book, and they're a lot like telephone paper. So I use them as well. So I cut these according to the pattern, and I'm not going to go into details about all that because you can go follow the link to that. I ended up making myself a template. It's just out of old beer box or whatever. And then I cut the red kite pieces according to this diamond, or this kite piece, I guess. I use that as the base for that. And then I put a little bit of glue and I stuck this to the telephone paper. And then I prepped all that I needed to prep all at once so that I have that part done. Calissa, my daughter Calissa, is a nurse, and I'm filming this during COVID time. And she works in critical care at a hospital, and the hospital has been asking for extra help. Their beds are full, and I've been needing to watch Calissa's boys a lot because her oldest son, Carver, was exposed to COVID in his preschool classroom, and so he's not allowed to go to preschool because he was exposed until probably another week, I think. And so I've had the boys a lot because Dad is a farmer and Dad's in the field combining. So Grandma has been called in for duty. The other grandma on the other side of the family, she had a COVID exposure, so she's quarantining as well. So we're just kind of doing the best we can to try to help Calissa be at the hospital and help Craig to be in the combine. So I've had the boys a lot. And that's okay. I really enjoy it. But being that we were downstairs and I don't bring the boys up into my sewing room because a 4-year-old and a 20-month-old are not conducive to a sewing room. So I prepped all of the papers when I was downstairs at the kitchen island with Carver, and it was something we could easily do. I'm sewing today on my machine I call Julie. It's this old Singer 1591, and it's been a favorite machine of mine. And it is a little noisy, so I'm warning you about that. When I'm sewing the strings, the spider string blocks, I just start out by putting a piece down, upside down, right onto the kite piece that's already there. And I just put it in, and I'm sewing with about a 1/4 inch seam. One thing really nice about sewing these is like anything goes. There's not a lot of cutting out to do before you actually sew. I appreciate that. And I string piece these. So once I pick up a piece of fabric, I try not to put it back into the box. I try to use it until it's all the way gone. I'm a chain piecer, so I love chain piecing, so I chain piece these. I know a lot of people that sew, they only want to put like, do 2, and I do more than 2, and before they clip them apart. I have a little bump out here. I'm going to cut that off. And I didn't bring a garbage can over here, so I'm just going to put that here. If you've been following along on my blog, you know that I've been working on fixing up my sewing room. And I am Delighted would be a good word to be in my sewing room now that it's so much more clean and it's so much more organized. A blog reader said to me, I'm snipping these apart. A blog reader said to me, she goes, "Isn't this the weekend that your son's going to come and finish fixing it all up?" I was supposed to have that weekend last weekend, but that didn't happen because I'm technically on quarantine too still. I had a COVID exposure as well. It was very innocent and unexpected, and we didn't know, obviously, when we were together that I could have been exposed, because we've been trying to keep me pretty much away from any kind of those kind of things if we possibly could. I had a COVID test done. My test came back negative, and I'm very thankful for that. But I'm just following all of the precautions, and even though my test came back negative, I technically still had a few more days to quarantine, so I'm sticking to that. But I'm almost done, Yahoo. So I used up that strip. Something that's handy when you are doing these spiderweb strings blocks is to have an iron close, and I have an iron right here. And I just iron my string piece back like this, and then I'll be ready to put a piece on this side. I use my wool ironing mat, and I will put a link to that down below as well. I love the ironing mat. It's my absolute favorite. I used to think that it was goofy that people would spend that much money for a mat to iron on, and now I have 3 of them. Yep, 3 of them. I keep a big one up here in my sewing room. I keep this small one that I can use close to the machines. Technically the smaller version that's just like 13.5 by 13.5, people suggest that those are good for taking on a retreat. But I really have not been to many retreats in my entire life. I think I've been to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2 of them I've hosted myself. So I don't know if that quite counts, but no, wait, I think I've been to 5. 3 of them I hosted. So it's fun to go, but I don't go that often. And now with COVID, I'm like uncertain of when I'll probably go again. So the next thing here, if you're doing a spiderweb string block, you could start over on this side, or you could keep working on that side. And I kind of do a variety. I just like to change it up a little bit so that every block doesn't look the same. So I'm putting my pieces right side together again and running another strip through the machine. I'm going to clip this one off and iron that one quick too. Making things with string blocks is just one of my absolute favorite things to do. Some people might worry when they're trying to use up an entire string, the entire, like, if you have a piece that's the width of fabric, they might not feel comfortable using up the whole string at once, thinking that they're not going to get the variety they want in a quilt. But I have 120 of these to do, and so if several blocks have things close together, I don't think you're really going to notice it with that many different blocks. I need a new string. I'm trying to mimic the other blocks that were done, and so you can see that this block has some lighter stuff in it, so I'm trying to incorporate some lighter things like this piece in my blocks as well, because I like to mimic and do something similar to those other blocks so that once we get them all in the quilt, they all match. If you've been a longtime blog reader of mine, you likely know that my husband and I, when he was living, we bought a foreclosure home, and we spent like $20,000 on the home. And then we I always say, we cut off a third of the house and then we added on to it after that. And that's pretty much what we did. And when we did that, we added on a kitchen, a bed, and a bathroom on the main floor. And on the upstairs, we added a double car garage and a laundry room. And the other thing we added is my sewing room right here. And I have so appreciated having it. I spent years and years in an old farmhouse where we lived previous to this. And then before that, we lived in a small 2-bedroom house. And before that, we lived in another 2-bedroom house. And I never really had a sewing space that was mine. I had to share it with our bedroom, or I had to sew in the dining room or do stuff like that. And once we got to this house and I could have my own sewing room, I was really excited about it at first. But then the weird thing is I was so used to sewing with the family around. And it got hard for me to come up here and sew by myself because I really loved being around the family while I was sewing. And so it was a little different. And so a lot of people long for a sewing room, but sometimes it's kind of odd that it's maybe not exactly what you want once you get it. Now that most of my family has flown the coop and I'm here, just me, I don't mind coming up here. But for a while, that was a real issue of mine, that I didn't always like coming upstairs to sew because I didn't like being by myself up here. Some of that's kind of changed now. I have a TV up here. I listen to audiobooks. I do a lot of things that I didn't used to. If you notice, I just cut a strip that used to be like 2.5 inches wide. I don't like pieces that big in my project, so I just trimmed it down and to a narrower strip. Okay, now I ended up with a little piece that's really too small right now, but as I get to the edge out here, it will get, so I'll be ready for a piece that's that size. So I always take these and I set these aside in a designated spot that I just like call the littles pile, and I put the little pieces there, and I'll come back to those when I get that far. As I'm sewing, it's in the afternoon. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. Calissa's boys were here in the morning, and she had worked the overnight shift, and so she drove home and she slept for a few hours, and then she came and got the boys, and then she took them home, and they're all going to go nap at her house. And she said, "Mom, what are you going to do?" And I said, "It's been a couple days since I sewed, so I'm going straight to the sewing room." And that's exactly what I did. My husband always used to tell me that if I was crabby or cranky, he would say, yeah, I think you just need to go up to the sewing room for a little bit. And in reality, I think he was exactly right, because I do take sewing and crafting as therapy. And today is the day after the election, as as I'm sewing here today. And of all days to need a little bit of therapy, I think this is the exact day that most of us could use a little therapy after trying to watch the results of the election come in. We're slowly getting these blocks going. Right now, this block has 3 pieces sewn onto it already. Some of these only have 2, but we're working on that. We'll get to that. I love to dig and pull and use up some pieces that, well, when's the last time you saw this country blue color with some hearts on it? I love to grab those and get those used up in these quilts if I can. It's a nice way to use up some of those pieces that are, well, I hate to say that they're out of style, but I guess that's kind of what the proper term would be. Not many people are sewing with them anymore. Oh, I found a batik in here. We'll use him up. If you look, this is like a good piece that could go cream-based or white-based. And if you remember when I first started talking about this quilt and I said I wanted to get some pieces that were, had a little bit of variety, adding that dark batik color in is just what my blocks need to keep them so they'll match or go better with the previous blocks that were made that I bought at the thrift store. Okay, I have another little piece left, and that's going to go in my littles pile over here. I've got a couple blocks that are kind of winding down, and I'll be able to use those littles in a little bit. Okay, what else do we have in here? Okay. Here I have a triangle that I'm going to iron. A lot of times I like to use triangle pieces at the end of my blocks, and so I'll put this here, that there in the little pile. I am a big time scrap collector. I really love scrappy quilts. Okay, I have a little leftover of this piece fabric. It's a little bit wide, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to cut that in half because I don't like my strings too wide. Plop that down, right sides together, and send it through. When Kalissa's kids were here this morning, we spent most of the time outside. They actually stayed overnight, and then, because Kalissa was working the overnight shift, and Craig was pretty pooped from farming, so I just said, oh, I'll just keep them. And I ended up keeping them. Sometimes it's easier to keep them rather than bundle them all up at 9:30 at night and send them home with Dad. It's easier to put them to bed here and just have them wake up here. And I think it gives Craig a quicker start in the morning. And I'm just a grandma who's too nice, I think. But I actually love having them, but it keeps me busy. And my mom always said something, if you have kids older in life, then it keeps you young. And I do agree with that. Having the kids around really does keep me busier and younger, I guess. Once I get this far that the pieces aren't overlapping each other, oftentimes rather than stopping and ironing this, I'll just come over here and put a piece onto this side, and then I'll only go to the iron a little less often. And for me, I think that's helpful to get stuff done a little faster if I'm not stopping and ironing every single time. So I can run, this way I can run 2 sides through before I iron. Oops, looks like I'm out of bobbin thread. Okay, I'm back at the machine. Some of you might be wondering, this is a light. If I don't have this light on, it's pretty dark to sew. You can see quite a difference, and this is in the daylight only. My machine doesn't, vintage machines don't give off a lot of light, so I always keep an extra light here. I really appreciate this light. Right now, as I'm kind of talking with you, it might seem like it's a little bit in the way, but it's not at all when I'm sewing. Several years ago, I went on what I call the fabric diet. It's probably the best diet I've ever been on and that I was most successful with. My premise was that I was going to not buy so much fabric, and instead I was going to try to buy things that my sewing room could use or need. So one of the things that I really wanted to get was to get better lighting. And so even though my light was expensive, being I wasn't spending so much money on fabric, it really wasn't a big deal that I bought the light. I went on, I love the light so much, I went on and I bought another light for my other machine, which is just over there. I have several machines, but the machine that I primarily sew at is a Pfaff. It's a Grand Quilter. I got it, oh, I don't know, probably close to 10 years ago. Oh, maybe even more than that. It came originally with a mid-arm machine because Pfaff made their version of a mid-arm, not a long arm and not a sit-down machine, but there was something, a mid-arm, and you used to connect this machine to the frame, but you could unconnect the frame too, or disconnect the frame, I guess is the right word, and then you could use it as a regular machine. I had that for a while and just hated the system. I had a next generation quilt frame that went with it, and it was just not for me. At that time, my daughter Kelly and I had started doing quite a few quilts together, and we were sewing and having things published in magazines, and we would have deadlines, and we had deadlines we needed to meet, and I would be upstairs crying because I couldn't get the machine to work. And the deadline was looming, and I was so very frustrated. And finally, one day, my husband said, "Enough is enough. Would you just go buy a new long arm and get a real long arm now?" And so I did exactly that, and I have a APQS Millennium is what I have now for my long arm, and I really love that. But I didn't know what to do with my old mid arm, and somebody said to me, "Oh, why don't you just sell it? Just sell it." Well, I did not think it was right or fair to sell someone a machine that I felt was a lemon. I mean, I hated the machine. I cried most of the time. I had terrible thread breakage. I was always frustrated with the machine, and I didn't think that that was right or proper for me to sell a machine that would cause someone else a headache. I remember what a dream it was of mine when I first got that machine, and I was so excited. I didn't want to make someone's experience terrible. And so I did not sell the machine. And I remembered how people had said that that the machine could be taken off the frame and used as a regular sewing machine. And so that's what I did. And I tried it, and oh my goodness, I love that machine. It is just a speed demon. It's a really fun machine to sew on. The only problem is that it only does a straight stitch. So if I'm quilting, that's really awesome. But if I want to do anything else, I need to have a different machine. So I have a Bernina 165 that was an embroidery machine that I bought and I thought I had to have. And I don't use the embroidery feature at all. I don't even have the machine set up. I only get it out if I have to do something that requires a zigzag. Otherwise, that machine stays away in its case, which is okay too. I don't have room to have all my machines out anyway. Oh, we're getting this set ironed. Okay, now you can see that I'm getting closer to the end here, so I could use some of these smaller pieces that I have set aside over here. The only problem is all of these that I have set aside over here are the exact same colors that I've already used, and I try not to repeat a color. So I am going to bypass and not use those small pieces right now. I'll use them in later blocks because, as you see, I have a lot more to sew, so those pieces will go into those quilt blocks instead. Okay. Remember that corner piece I ironed a while back? I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to take that, and you can see that here's my corner that's left to cover yet. And if I put it on there like this, that will cover the whole corner. And so a lot of times I like to save triangles and use the triangles to cover the corners like that. It just is a quick, easy way to do it. We're getting towards the end of this stack of blocks, which is kind of fun. Oh, here I can use this one. This piece didn't have any of that blue batik, so I'm going to throw that right on here. Okay, and now you can see if I turn this triangle out that it's going to cover the end here. Okay, Okay, and I have one more piece to cover in there. Okay, here's something. I have this odd piece that's shaped like this in my scrap bucket, and so I'm going to just cut this off into a wider spot. It must have been somebody's making kind of like a clamshell quilt is what my video cut out on me, darn it. But we have another block done. I'm so excited about that. And we're getting down the home stretch. I think I have about 3 here left to finish. I have so much scraps. I love that I do, but oh, sometimes I just wish I would stop everything that I'm sewing and just sew scraps until I don't have as many anymore. I know a lot of people probably throw away some of these scraps, and I probably should, but oh, I just love it. And when I sew a quilt with all this little, what a lot of people would throw away, I just feel like I kind of like cheated the system. I know that sounds kind of funny, but in a way, that's just how I feel. My something for nothing quilts are my absolute favorite quilts that I have. Okay, I have another piece for this corner. This one needs a little bit of iron. Kelly would be laughing at me right now, my daughter Kelly, because she likes to do things very systematically. So she would decide exactly how many pieces she's going to run through the machine at a time. And she might decide that she's going to run 8 pieces through the machine, and she would put 1 piece on the side of all 8 of them. Then she would take all 8 of them out and she would iron all 8 of them. And then she would take them all back to the machine. And then once at the machine, she would put either the right side or the left side on every single one of them. And then she would clip them apart. And she's very systematic when she does it. And I am just totally not. I'm really not systematic about it at all. I'm just kind of, oh, whatever works. Whenever I feel like grabbing one out of the machine and iron and clipping them apart, that's just what I do. Okay, we're rounding the corner on this bunch, guys. Well, okay, I need something on this corner yet too. Oh, that should work. A little bit of ironing, and we got another one done. A little bit more of ironing, and we got another one done. And I have one left here in the machine, and what I'm going to do is I am going to take a piece and start a new one, start a new block, and run that through. And I'm going to get my piece from this batch out, and I'm going to iron the 2 corners that need to be ironed. And it looks like I have my set of blocks done that I started. I started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have 6 triangles done. Now when I go downstairs, I'm going to put them and I'll cut and follow the line that's already there, and that's how I'll get my shape back to my triangle. And then I will have Carver help me trim or pull off the papers of the triangles, and he just loves doing that. It's so much fun, and it's good hand strengthening activity. It's good for fine motor skills, good for hand to eye coordination. So plus that, it's a lot of fun hanging out with Grandma and doing what he used to call twilting. It was my favorite thing that he always used to call quilting, twilting. I have a lot of fun with him. So anyway, that's where I'm going to leave you today, and I will insert a picture again of my finished spiderweb string quilt that I did before. And if you enjoyed watching the video, and if you enjoyed sewing along with me, I hope that you'll let me know by either leaving a comment or that you'll give the video a thumbs up so I'll know that we want to do another one. Thanks so much. Have a good day.